ambassador to Washington. And given all of this, what do you say to those in the country and those in your own party who say, frankly, that you have run out of steam?
What you're about to watch is not just another press conference, it's a brutal political reckoning. Following his so-called Mandelson reset speech, Prime Minister Keir Starmer walked straight into a hostile Q&A where reporters didn't hold back. Senior journalists confronted him over judgment, credibility, national security, and the explosive fallout surrounding Lord Mandelson's links to Jeffrey Epstein. This wasn't spin, this wasn't theatre. This was accountability, live and unfiltered. Questions about lies, cover-ups, security vetting failures, and whether Starmer has lost control of his own party dominated the room. Even Labour MPs are now questioning his authority, and some are openly asking whether his position is untenable. Watch carefully how Starmer responds. What he admits, what he avoids, and what he refuses to answer may tell you far more than the headlines. Stay until the very end to understand why this moment could mark a turning point for Starmer's leadership and why so many believe this story is far from over.
Thank you, Chris Mason, BBC News. Prime Minister, why was it that a man who had already twice resigned from government and, crucially, had a publicly known ongoing friendship with a convicted paedophile was appointed by you as ambassador to Washington? And given all of this, what do you say to those in the country and those in your own party who say, frankly, that you have run out of steam?
Well, Chris, let me just address that head on and perhaps clarify something I said at Prime Minister's Questions yesterday about the relationship between Mandelson and Epstein. Because what I meant was it has been known publicly for some time that they knew each other. And that is precisely why, when we were going through the appointment process for the ambassador role, we asked questions about the nature and extent of that relationship. And what I didn't say yesterday, partly inhibited by the approach of the police, is that that is precisely why those questions were asked. Questions about the nature and extent of the relationship, whether Mandelson had stayed, as was suggested, at Epstein's premises. And the answers given to those questions were intentionally intended to create the impression that Mandelson barely knew Epstein, deliberately to create that impression. I had no reason at that stage to think that was anything other than the truth, and therefore we proceeded. What I learned in September was that it was not the truth, when further emails came to light, I think Bloomberg. And having asked some further questions, including questions about whether Mandelson received gifts and benefits and hospitality, and the nature of the relationship, I sacked Mandelson from the role. Now, I regret making the decision to have appointed him in the first place. Had I known at the time what I know now, or knew in September, I'd have never done it. And that's why today I've apologised for the fact that I appointed him in the first place and I believed his lies. Thank you very much, Chris. And look, we're moving forward as a country. Today, you've just heard the speech about Pride in Place, one of the most important projects that we're running, that will put money in communities right across the country. And that is the driving purpose of this government, changing lives for the better, focusing on Pride in Place, where people live in their own communities, and making sure we're utterly focused on the cost of living. Thank you, Chris. Beth, can I come to you?
Thank you. Thank you, Prime Minister. Prime Minister, we can all hear your anger, your regret, and most importantly, your apology to victims of Epstein for appointing Mandelson as your US ambassador. But look, whatever he said or didn't say, it has proved a catastrophic error of your judgment to put him back into your government. Some of your MPs believe you must take responsibility for this in order to restore trust in politics amongst the public. And some are saying publicly now that you should stand down because your positions become untenable. Why are they wrong? Thank you.
Well, Beth, as I've said a number of times, I regret the decision to appoint Mandelson as ambassador. He was asked questions about the nature and extent of his relationship with Epstein, and he told lies. I had no reason at the time to know they were lies. Subsequently, I found out them to be lies. And this week, we found out way beyond the lies that we found out in September. We found out what he was up to in the aftermath of the '08 crash, when most of the government and most of the country was doing its level best to make sure people didn't lose their jobs, their livelihoods and their savings. And at that time, he chose to disclose sensitive secrets to Epstein, almost simultaneously as receiving them. And that is what I meant when I said earlier about the deceit and the standards that I stand for in public life. Yes, at the time I appointed him, I got answers from him which I believed to be true. He painted a picture of barely knowing Epstein. I didn't know that was lies at the time. I regret I didn't know. I've apologised for the fact that I appointed him in the first place, having believed those lies. Thank you, Beth. Robert.
What do you say to your MPs? Some are publicly saying this morning they think your position is untenable. Please, directly, what do you say to them?
Firstly, let me say I understand their anger and frustration. I am angry and frustrated like them, because nobody wants to see these deceits in public life. They are angry about his association with Epstein, as am I. They're angry about what he did at the tail end of the last Labour government, and frustrated, as am I, that the full information of what was asked and answered when he was appointed can't be in the public domain. That is frustrating. As I say, I had hoped to deploy some of that at PMQs yesterday, because I wanted people to know what was said and what I received, but frustrating that can't be done. So I understand their frustration, but we must remain focused on what we were elected into government to do, which is to change this country for the better for millions of people, and that's what we will do. And today, in Pride in Place, what we've done on the economy are examples, but only examples of what we're doing. Thank you, Beth. Robert, well, hang on, Robert, ITV.
Prime Minister, time and again during the general election campaign, you promised to end chaos in politics. You failed miserably, and there is no one to blame but yourself. If your MPs were to decide that they wanted another leader, and if somebody else put themselves forward as leader, would you fight that?
Well, Robert, I was elected on a mandate in 2024 to change the country for the better, and that is what we're doing. And if you look at what we've done, for example, on the economy, with inflation coming down, and the Bank of England says coming down to target in the first half of this year, with interest rates being cut now 6 times, which is the highest rate of reduction since the '08 crash, with the work we've done to lift 500,000 children out of poverty, that is the change that and the Pride in Place work that we're doing, examples of which I've just gone through, that is what we were elected to do as a government. That is the change we're bringing about. And am I frustrated that the focus is not on that and on other things because of the misbehaviour and deceit of other people? Of course I am. But of course I am. I understand that. But I was lied to. I was lied to. Deceit. Now, am I frustrated and angry that the good work we're doing gets out of focus because of that, and that tomorrow's front pages are unlikely to be about the Pride in Place project? Of course I am. Of course I'm angry and frustrated about that. But that is the work, that is the change that will affect millions of lives, and I will remain focused on it. LB, will you just... I've got Natasha from LBC. Natasha
from LBC. Prime Minister, you mentioned national security in your speech just now being vital for our future. Donald Tusk has said Poland will launch an investigation into links between Jeffrey Epstein and Russian intelligence. Would you like to do the same? And on Mandelson, obviously you are a distinguished lawyer. I think the question many of our listeners and viewers have is, when you had that evidence about Lord Mandelson handed to you, why did you then believe him?
Just on the first point, I think whether it's Poland or elsewhere, we're obviously always working with our allies on any issues of national security. On the question of why, look, the questions were asked of Mandelson, and he provided answers to those questions. They were about the nature and extent of his relationship with Epstein. They were about issues such as, did you stay at the premises? Because that was in the public domain. That was something we needed answers to. And when he provided answers to that, I had no reason to believe he was telling anything other than the truth. In September, Bloomberg produced some emails which made it clear to me and others that what I'd been told at the time was clearly not truthful, which is why I sacked him. What we've learnt this week is the further deceit that has been carried out in relation to government secrets that were released during the very course of the recovery when the government was working so hard to the 2008 crash. But I believed what he said to me. I regret that. I apologise for having believed him. He gave answers to the questions that were asked of him. I assumed and treated those answers as true. That was obviously a mistake. Thank you. I've got Sophia from Sun.
Thank you, Prime Minister. You've spoken passionately today about victims and apologised to them. So I have to ask, even though you did not know the full extent of Mandelson's ongoing friendship with Epstein, it was never a good look at the time. Did you not personally have any reservations whatsoever about what you did know about that ongoing friendship? Any doubts, any curiosities? And do you feel confident you can ride out this storm?
Well, the original, there was a due diligence exercise that culminated in questions being asked. Because I wanted to know the answer to certain issues, that's why those questions were asked. The answer to those questions were not truthful. There was then, I should add, security vetting carried out independently by the security services, which is an intensive exercise that gave him clearance for the role, and you have to go through that before you take up the post. Clearly, both the due diligence and the security vetting need to be looked at again. I've already strengthened the due process. I think we need to look at the security vetting because it now transpires that what was being said was not true, and had I known then what I know now, I'd never have appointed him in the first place. In relation to your question, I was elected in with this Labour government to bring about change for millions of people. That's what I intend to do. The examples today are only examples of the pride in place. That makes a massive difference to so many communities, and it's not just a question of the money we're putting into communities, it's the power we're giving to them to make the choice over what the money is used for, which is vitally important. And the work we're doing on the economy to stabilise it, which is what we've done, will be to the huge benefit of millions of people across the country. Can I have Dave from the Mirror, please? Dave.
Dave from Mirror. Could I just clarify on the basis of what you said today and what you said yesterday? What was your understanding of what the relationship between Mandelson and Epstein was? I mean, were you under the impression then that he had completely broken off contacts, friendship at the point of conviction? And at the point you knew that there had been a relationship in the past, you knew that this was potentially a very dangerous situation that could come back to haunt you. Did you, as it were, make a deal with the devil that you knew that this could be damaging, but at the same time Donald Trump is equally sort of impacted by this?
No, the questions were precisely to get to that question of what was the nature and extent of the relationship, and then details about places he may have stayed. And the picture painted, the impression deliberately given by the information that was provided and the information that wasn't provided. So the information that was provided and that which wasn't was deliberately intended by Mandelson to make my team believe that he barely knew Epstein. That's the picture he painted. That was a lie, but that's the lie that he painted, and that's the basis on which we made our decision. Can I have Kieran from The Guardian?
Thank you, Prime Minister. Kieran Stacey from The Guardian. Prime Minister, I wanted to read out some of the things that Labour MPs have told us in the last 24 hours about you. One told us, I'm personally not sure I could trust myself to back the Prime Minister in a confidence vote. Another said, it's like Chris Pincher on steroids, it's over. Another said, this government is on the run. One former minister said, it's time for a fresh start, the sooner the better. Isn't the real lesson from yesterday that you can no longer command the majority in the Commons? And if so, isn't your authority fatally undermined?
Well, look, I understand the anger and frustration amongst Labour MPs about what has happened, the deceit, both in the appointment of Mandelson as ambassador and what happened at the tail end of the last Labour government. I actually share that anger and frustration. It was palpable yesterday. I'm not surprised. As I said, most people come into public life to serve the common good, actually whichever political party they're in. And we may have different approaches, different politics, different ideologies, but the vast majority of people come into public life to do their best to improve their communities, to improve their country. And so when people who've been elected into power with that mindset find out that somebody else who's held a position of power does not share that mindset, has undermined it, they're angry and frustrated, not just at the deceit and the lies in the individual cases, but because they know it undermines what they stand for, the politics that they believe in. Now, I understand that, but we are changing this country for the better. We had 14 long years of failure under the Tory government, and we're correcting that. We've stabilised the economy, we've put a huge amount of investment into our public services, and we're rebuilding our communities. And I intend to go on doing that vital work for our country because I believe it is the absolute focus and the first importance for this government. I've got Hugo from the Eye.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Hugo Jai from the Eye paper. You've talked today about what you see as some of the successes of your government, including the Pride in Place programme. You've also issued a warning about the prospect of a reform or Conservative government, which you say would undermine national cohesion. Is your message to your own MPs who are now sceptical about your leadership that removing you would destroy the work your government's done and make a reform-led government more likely?
My message is that every minute we spend talking about anything other than the cost of living, Pride in Place, how we stabilise our economy, and how we make the massive argument that we need to make, the argument of our time, that we must unite this country, understand that to be British is to be tolerant, reasonable, compassionate and diverse, and fight for it against the toxic division of reform. Every minute we spend not talking and focusing on that is an absolute minute wasted.
If you believe this conversation must not be silenced, make sure you like this video, share it everywhere, and subscribe.